It's never been better for business brokers to be practicing. I mean, all the technology that we have now,
Yeah.
we should be really just running circles around the brokers that were in the peak of their careers in the 80s and the 90s and before that because of the technology that we have.
I'm super excited to have the one and only Jim Parker from the Boss Group, from Business Brokers of Florida, from the IBBA, from Let's Talk with Jim Parker. You've seen Jim everywhere. Jim has an abundance mindset. He loves to give. He's been a business broker for a quarter of a century, and I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing great, Neil. Thank you so much for having me on. You say a quarter of a century, that makes me sound so old. I like the nearly 25 years better.
Well, own it, right? You've been doing this for a long time. You're a seasoned broker,
I'm
right?
seasoned, very seasoned.
Very seasoned. And it's funny because this little space that we're in about talking about business brokerage on the internet, I mean, it's me and you and Ron West that are there's a lot of business buyer type communities, but the people that are talking about business brokerage specifically, there's not a lot of us. And I always refer to you and
No,
the content Ron West is doing. I'll give that plug early. Check out Jim Parker's YouTube channel if you're not already following there, and the Business Brokerage Press. Because if you like this type of content, there's plenty of it there. It's all good stuff. Today's topic is around the future of business brokerage and why business brokerage is probably ripe for the brokerage specialist. But I want to start with kind of your background, the journey that got you here. You're in Florida, right?
yes, I am. I'm in Florida. I've been down in Florida now since the mid 1990s. I've been here my entire career
Yeah.
for selling businesses.
Why is Florida so crazy?
In what sense?
Well,
We're crazy in so many senses.
you got the Florida
You could
man
talk about
thing.
politics. You could talk about business brokerage. I mean, you name it. Florida's just nuts. We're just nuts down here, Neil.
Well, yeah, it is.
I'm
It
not.
is.
I'm not afraid to say that or shy to
It's
say
true.
that.
Hey, I was born in Tallahassee, Florida. I'm a Floridian myself. Um, but Tallahassee's not the exciting part of Florida. It's the business end of Florida.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the business brokerage piece. Why is it that Business Brokers of Florida is such a huge association?
I really think it's because Business Brokers of Florida, the main premise of that association is that we co-broke with each other.
Yeah.
And we're the only state or regional association in the entire country that has a formal co-brokering situation where you belong to the Business Brokers of Florida, which is the BBF. You are mandated that you have to co-broke with other business brokers.
Yeah.
So I think that that's why we're as big as we are because we're at the point in Florida where if you're a business broker, it's hard to compete down here in this area or in Florida if you're not co-brokering. And I think that's what attracts. And I think what also does too is it allows people that are newer in the industry to kind of get their feet wet being a buyer's agent. They don't need to, go out and find listings and do ad backs, do the broker's opinion of value, take it to the market. I think it's a little bit easier working with buyers than it is sellers. That's actually what I did my first 5 years that I was in this industry. Is I specialized working with buyers coming in from overseas,
Yeah.
and I don't think you need as much skill um, to work with buyers as you do to work with sellers initially. And I think it's a good program because if you got a buyer down here in Florida, you can go to the BBF MLS system and try to find them a business and co-broker it.
Definitely. We don't have that here in North Carolina. And I think there are some other states that are more similar to Florida, but Florida's definitely the farthest. And for new brokers, man, I wish I could have jumped in that way. I mean, North Carolina, you got to go find some listings or else you ain't selling anything. So I think to
You got to
have that
learn the hard
opportunity,
way.
yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's better for the clients as well, the buyers and sellers, to have brokers on both sides that understand agency. It's a kind of a mature level of brokerage. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yes and no. I mean, I think the market here in Florida is very, very mature. I think the
Yeah.
BBF is just a fantastic, phenomenal association. But like any other company or association out there, you've got your great ones, your good ones, and your not so good ones, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Here in North Carolina, because you chaired the BBF for years, right? You led that association for a long time before you were on the IBBA board. But here in North Carolina, the CVBBA. So we've got 3 states within our association, and I led it during the pandemic, so 2020. I remember we were trying to get to like 100 members, 100 members, 100 business brokers in our association. And in North Carolina alone, there's 100,000 licensed real estate brokers. And I always use that as kind of a metric of how few business brokers there are. Like our association, we're just trying to get to
Right.
that's a quite a spread. But you guys have a
Well,
lot
you
more.
know what, Neil? You know what, Neil? I mean, this might not be appropriate for the show, but you know what? I actually apply to be a CVBBA member in a couple of years.
Really? Okay.
I don't know if I've told you that. Yeah, yeah, we're thinking about actually moving up to South Carolina.
Oh, wonderful. Would love to have. Welcome to the Carolinas. That's awesome. Yeah,
Get away from this crazy Florida down
that's
here.
right.
No, I
The
love Florida.
Floridian.
It's just time for a new
Well,
scene.
before we leave Florida and about Jim, you have a beautiful yard, don't you? Have you done some landscaping? I've seen pictures of you in your yard. Isn't that one of your hobbies?
Yeah, my wife and I we like to be amateur landscape people. You know, we're dangerous. You know, we like to plant things and kill a lot of plants. And
I love that. Yeah, I
no,
love,
we enjoy landscaping. We built a jungle backyard. Our backyard is a jungle backyard.
uh-huh.
So if you walk back there, we've probably got 30 or 40 bamboo plants, about 4 or 5 different varieties, and we've probably got 50 or 60 different kinds of plants back there all together. And it looks like one big jungle. And we built a 14-foot stream with a 9 foot pond, and we have a little deck back there, which I did not build. We hired somebody to build the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's our cool little place to hang out back there.
Any fish in the pond? You got koi or anything?
There used to be.
Oh,
There
okay.
used to be. And Neil, went on vacation and, I was topping off the water with
Yeah.
the hose before we left for vacation. This is like 2 years ago. I came back from vacation about 2 weeks later and all the fish were dead. I had left the water on, and you know how you're only supposed to change out like 20 or 25% of the water.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You,
and I'll tell you, I'm smiling now, but I'll tell you, I was really beaten up for a couple weeks, because I killed like 6 fish, the
yeah.
big fish, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Were they koi or
And
gold?
we had
Oh, okay.
goldfish, because the pond was too small for the koi.
Well, koi are more
But
expensive.
they were goldfish that were this
Yeah.
big, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, it's probably chlorine that killed them, and they probably their gills probably burned. It's probably a slow and painful death, Jim. I want you to know they probably didn't go out easy. And I'm just
Neil, they were
giving you a hard
swelled up. They were like 3 times the size they normally are.
time. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about your garden. I've seen pictures; it's beautiful, and I'm a naturalist. I was a biologist before I was a business broker, so I'm always interested in that
I
stuff.
know.
So you've been at it for. We've established you're a very old man, quarter century in the business. Yeah, if you're watching and you think I'm being hard on Jim, we're friends, so I can razz him.
Yeah, me and Neil we're good
Yeah.
friends.
And you've been in this industry for a long time. Tell me about like what you've seen. How has this industry changed in the million years that you've been in this
Oh
industry?
my gosh, Neil, I'm going to tell you, like, I remember the days where we would fax offers back and forth between brokers and buyers and sellers. And, you'd fax it back so many times that you would have to get all the parties together in person so we could get wet signatures. And
Wow.
we'd have to get wet signatures on 3 different copies. So the buyer would get one copy, the seller would get one copy, give one copy to the attorney. So
Wow.
the fax machines were back then. And I remember, like, this is before video calls, obviously. This is before smartphones,
Yeah.
so you were really limited. Like, you left for the day, you pretty much left for the day on an appointment. We didn't have Google Maps and Apple Maps. We had MapQuest. I
Right.
remember printing out the MapQuest paper and
Yeah.
bringing that. I mean, there's so much has changed. And I'll tell you, Neil, like, I think that it's never been better for business brokers to be practicing. I mean, all the technology that we have now,
Yeah.
we should be really just running circles around the brokers that were in the peak of their careers in the 80s and the 90s and before that because of the technology that we have. And
Yeah.
with that being said, I'm feeling, Neil, that the more like so-called rules that I was supposed to follow as a business broker, the more of those that I break, um, the better, more successful I get. So I think that, the original rules that I was taught 25 years ago, or I don't know. I wish I wasn't taught them.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I don't know if you were taught the wrong rules or it's just changed so much. But yeah, I remember reading some stuff, a rule book about something about yellow pages and the shop floor. It was very antiquated. The first guide that I got on how to run an office to sell a business. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, advertising in newspapers.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Well, and where do you? So, what's the current status right now, business brokers? Where do you think it's at? I mean, we just came back from the conference. We had 1,000 brokers in Orlando. What's going on right now? We talked about the history, but how are things going now in your
Neil,
opinion?
I'm going to tell you, I'm serious about this, and so I think sellers need to know this, buyers need to know this. I think brokers people that are thinking about becoming a broker need to hear this. I honestly think that we're in the golden age of business brokerage. I really, really do.
Yeah,
I mean, like I know everybody that listens to my stuff. I know I say the same things over and over again, but like 40% of all business owners in the United States were born before 1964.
yeah,
So 4 out of 10 business owners. So you got all those people. So think they're born in 1964. That is how old is that? That's 61 right now.
yeah,
61 years old.
yeah,
So 40% of business owners in the United States are 61 years or older. So you got this huge wave of buyers that are looking to sell.
yeah,
Private equity has grown 400% since 2000. So you got all the private equity groups out
yeah.
there. And then, right now, I mean, Neil, you're hearing about like for so many years in this industry, I felt like our industry was like under the radar. And now, like we were just talking, you and I were just talking the other day, IBBA, the International Business Brokerage Association conference, had their largest number of attendees, over 1,000 attendees.
Yeah.
And, we're also looking in a situation where I think it kind of like we've been running under the radar, but the last couple of years, there's like so many people getting into our industry
Hmm.
that are either third party people or people that are supporting our industry
Yeah.
or people that are competing against business brokers. I mean, we got all these so-called gurus that teach buyers how to buy businesses and stuff, and obviously they're charging a lot of money for that. And
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that information is really important or not, but at least, although I don't think it's a smart way to spend your money, and at least it's bringing attention to people saying that there is a way that you can buy a business and you can create you can increase your net worth and become much better off in life by buying a business. I don't think a lot of people didn't know that existed.
And I'd add to that current status we talked about that you described the silver tsunami, but the have you heard of the COVID reset, the COVID pause on the silver tsunami?
What, that they're getting backed up, they're behind on their retirement savings because of COVID?
Not necessarily. Like the silver tsunami started and then COVID happened. And I don't know about you, but during COVID, I was telling people, like, don't sell your business right now. I know you want to sell, but you're at historically low value. Wait till it gets better and then sell. And a lot of people did that. They couldn't or they didn't sell at the low point, but we're 5 years past the pandemic. So
Yep.
it's a good like decade, and within the decade now in particular we're far enough in the pandemic that it is kind of back to the real silver tsunami that was kind of paused for a little bit.
That's a very interesting perspective. We've
I'm
got everything going against us. I mean, we've got everything lining up right now, Neil. I mean,
Yeah,
everything. SBA lending is very aggressive and everything. It's a great time to be buying businesses. It's a great time to be a broker selling businesses.
I agree. I agree. And the technology is moving so quickly with AI. I interviewed Glenn Cooper, another veteran in our industry. He was talking about how he's leaning into AI, and he's 70. He's on the podcast. He's talking about he's 77 years old and just diving deeper and deeper into AI. So it's mainstream if folks like that are getting into it, and that's going to make things move a lot
Yep.
faster as well.
Yeah, and I think better and offer a better product at the end of the day too, and better service.
Yeah, I want to hear more of your thoughts on AI because I think some I've tried some of the newfangled tools and they weren't quite there yet. They were sexy. They said they would do everything they wanted. They great at selling the product, but when it came time to deliver, they weren't quite there yet. Have you had experiences using AI?
Neil, I'm the same way. I don't know. I'm the same way as you. Like, I don't know if it's really there. I'm going to tell you, I use Chat GPT.
Yeah,
I use that a couple times a day at
yeah,
least. But it's more for like writing emails, putting some thoughts down, that type of a thing. And
yeah,
I can see the potential though. I see the potential with AI. I just, and I'm using it on a daily basis, but I think that we're not even close to where it's going to be in a few years and how much it can impact us in a few years.
yeah. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I'm all in on it. I think it's great, and I think it's just going to allow us to speed through the noise to get to the parts where we need to slow down and focus on the parts that matter, the human interaction pieces. I like it as a vehicle to get through the all the noise. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm getting 300 buyers on every listing, and we have to really do a lot of work to use a lot of automation. Hopefully, AI will help with this to find the ones that aren't just tire kickers, that aren't just bots or whatever. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and we're the same way. We're getting a crazy amount of buyer inquiries on our listings.
Yeah, yeah, and I do think it's fed from that. The call gurus call them whatever you want. We used to just call them business buyers. Now it's a ETA. There's a lot of new jargon attached to them, but they're business buyers when you break it down. There's a lot more business buyers for sure.
Yeah, there is. And if you're a business buyer, I'm going to say this: if you're a business buyer out there, don't try to make yourself look like a private equity group. If you're not a private equity group,
Yeah,
not all business owners want to sell to private equity.
true.
So you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. And I'm sorry to bring that up because I'm
No,
seeing that more and more of buyers like trying to look like private equity groups, building websites and things like that.
I agree.
I guess it gives them more clout, but it
I
doesn't at
agree.
the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, it's confusing. It's a confusing marketplace for owners, for brokers. We have to understand who these people are, like what category to put them in, and they're representing themselves in different ways, and where their money's coming from, if it's committed, if they're going to go get it. It's hard to tell what's out there. It takes a lot more diligence and vetting right now, but it's
Yeah.
just all part of the process. Well, I want to move on. I want to talk about. So we talked a little bit about the industry. We talked about you seeing how it's changed, but there is a big change in the Jim Parker world. You in the last few years, you pivoted into becoming an industry specialist. So I want to learn more about that. I mean, what pushed you in that direction?
Neil, I kind of, since I've been doing business brokerage, there's always been people who have specialized in certain industries.
Yeah,
But I feel like since COVID, our industry has changed drastically. And I'm seeing more and more brokers picking a vertical and going down that road. And
yeah,
I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a major shift. We're going to see a lot of brokers becoming specialists and specializing in an industry and targeting the entire United States in that industry instead of being the neighborhood general business
yeah.
broker like you and I have always traditionally been, and the industry itself has traditionally been. I mean, the benefits just what are really, really big out there for that. So, even though I'm getting old, like you say, I have to stay with it and stay young
Uh-huh.
and stay with where I think the industry is going. So that's why I picked the verticals.
And this ties into what we were talking about earlier. Like you don't have to fax people anymore. Now we can zoom in and almost be there. It's not the same as being there, but people are closer in a way, so we can go farther in
Hmm.
reaching them. So
Hmm.
that's interesting that you think that more. It's not just this isn't just a Jim Parker decision. You think more. There's going to be more specialists in general. That's an emerging trend in business brokerage.
I think so. I think we're just on the, like I said, it's always been around, but I think we're just on the verge of the beginning of it happening. And I think as we go, it's going to start to snowball,
Yeah.
and more brokers are gonna start heading down that path. And so I wanted to pick the verticals before they were all taken.
Uh, well, let's talk about your verticals. You've got a couple of verticals. Talk to us about what type of business you're focused on these days.
And I picked two verticals. I think typically when a broker picks per vertical, they pick one vertical. I picked two. I love both spaces. I've been selling in both of those spaces my entire career. I've sold a lot of businesses in those two
Yeah.
areas,
Yeah.
but I picked two because, I wanted to hedge my bet in case something was happening in the economy or in the country or in the
Yeah.
world that hurt one of the industries. I wanted to have a second industry that I could also back up. So I'm specializing in selling auto repair related businesses, which could be general auto repair, oil and lube, tire, collision shops. Those type of businesses, or things in the lawn and landscape business. It could be lawn maintenance, it could be fertilization, pest control, landscape, hardscapes.
Uh-huh. Interesting. I let you pick two verticals, and I like your strategy there. And so let's talk a little bit about specialization. You kind of hinted at, I want to talk about it from the broker's perspective and also from the buyer and owner's perspective, but you're talking about kind of mitigating a little bit of reducing some risk by having two verticals. Is that one of that makes sense because I've talked to some business owners and it's not that they're tired, it's that their business model's tired and it's kind of an outdated
Mhm.
business model. So you're kind of taking this global perspective, like what if one of the industries goes down and there's not a lot of opportunity there. I didn't even think about that a whole vertical could have an ups and downs, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the economy to, world events, wars, stuff like that, to pandemics, to, technology
Yeah.
advancements. You know what I mean? Like, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
I sold that garden shop in 2022 and we talked about the pandemic. They were having record numbers and there was this notion of people are building victory gardens. Have you heard that term, victory gardens?
I remember, well, I heard Victory Gardens from World War II, but I haven't heard it in recent times.
That was the idea that if people were like staying at home and they were spending time in their gardens and that's how they dealt with COVID. But they were crushing it
Yeah.
during that 2022 time and the numbers were really good. So that's a good example of kind of the cyclical nature hitting a vertical. Um, but yeah, so from a industry perspective, it makes sense that you could specialize, pick a niche. How is it different as a business broker? You mentioned a bigger footprint. Like, how does it affect your marketing in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm not targeting, as much locally or in my
Yeah.
state. I'm targeting across the country, which makes it a little bit more challenging. And, in a way, I'm almost kind of starting my practice from scratch, Neil. And
Yeah.
I'm still selling, other kinds of businesses in the state of Florida, but
Right.
I'm basically starting two new practices across the
Yeah.
country, because I'm entering markets where the people don't know who I am.
Yeah.
They don't know I've been around for 25 years, etc.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And does it require a lot of travel? We talked about you can Zoom, but do you try and make it to associations and the vertical niche type audiences? Is that a part of being a specialist?
yeah, yeah, like lawn and landscape. I went to one of their conferences at the end of
Yeah.
last year. I went to one of a to an industry conference in the auto repair space at the beginning of this year, Tire Association, the New
Yeah.
England Tire Association. So, I plan on going to, a couple conferences a year for each vertical.
Uh-huh.
What I found though, since COVID, with Zoom calls and just the mindset everybody has, I just I have sold so many businesses in the last 5 years that I never met with the buyer. I never met with the
Yeah.
seller physically.
Yeah.
So I sold a lot, and I'm not talking about necessarily businesses out of state. I've sold a lot of businesses in state, in my
Yeah.
own backyard, where I never
Yeah.
met with the buyer and the seller.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how, if you really need that anymore.
I
You
agree.
can be located anywhere and do what you do, what we do.
Yeah. No, I agree. We're doing the
Because
same
even,
thing,
I, and Neil, I'm going to say, even like the buyer seller meetings,
right?
because what we do is we start off with the buyer seller phone call after we've pre-screened the buyers, blah, 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 blah. When we get to the first interaction of the buyer and the seller, we always do that by phone call
Uh-huh.
or by a video call.
Yeah.
And we usually do a couple calls, whether it's video or regular call, before we have that in-person meeting. But
Yeah.
whether it is a phone call, video call, or in-person meeting, my take, and it's always been like this for 25 years, is that as brokers, we should be doing as little talking as
I
possible in
agree.
that meeting. You
Yeah.
know, we've done all the work before that meeting. We've got a lot of work to do after that meeting. But to me,
Hmm.
it's about the buyer and the seller getting to know each other. The seller seeing if the buyer's the right cultural fit for the employees and for the customers and for
Yeah.
the suppliers, and the buyer trying to determine if the business is a good fit for them, and obviously to see if the buyer and the seller like each other and respect
Yeah.
each other. And I think every time we open up our mouths as brokers, we're not letting them build that relationship and that bond. So even like when we have those in-person meetings, you know, I've gone to a couple of them. Sometimes I'll go to like the first one or two with the seller, but if they want me to, but it's really not needed.
I'm glad you went there because this is kind of a hot topic. We talked about this with our friends about not showing up for those buyer owner meetings. I see it both ways. I know the buyers sometimes try and start negotiating and it's not appropriate. So I like to be there to prevent that. I like to be there to hear what they're talking about because I hear the questions they're asking. I can tell if there's chemistry, but I also hear what you're saying. Like we're getting in the way just by being there. And part of me thinks with this on the topic of a specialist, it's probably easier in the specialist world to not be a part of the buyer owner meeting because they probably already know a lot more about the specialty just being the
Yeah,
nature of yeah because they're if
yeah.
it's a doctor's office it's probably a doctor coming in. If it's an automotive shop it's probably an automotive guy, so they can talk about lug nuts or whatever auto shop people like to talk about that we may they can bond over that stuff and it's not even business related. So I could see where, especially being a specialist, it may make even more sense not to be there for those buyer owner meetings.
And don't forget, we're doing a couple phone calls before that meeting,
Yeah,
so
the
we're
prep.
seeing what the dynamics are between the two, and you know we get a good feeling of it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm always on the fence about being there because I want to know what they're talking about. But that's interesting, and I know we know some people that just will never go to those, and they think I'm just going to be in the way. Well, in terms of being a specialist, like how do you think how do you think it's different than being a generalist? Like the questions you're asking, do you kind of know? Is it different questions? Because it's the same type of business in each vertical each time, so you must kind of know the playbook, right?
Right, right. You know, and I would tell you, my business partner, Kerry, he loves being a general business broker because
Yeah.
he likes it being new every time, and he
Yeah.
likes it seeing different types of businesses. And that's what makes him excited about our industry.
Hmm.
You know, for me, I love the fact that you get to know that industry very, very, very well.
Yeah.
You know, every time if you're constantly taking on a new business, and obviously you and I have sold a lot of businesses over the years, that we have a lot of experience in different types of businesses, but still, you know, you list that business, and you gotta figure out all the information that you're going to want to know from the seller. And when you're a specialist, you've got all those questions already ready to go. You know what I mean? So like when I'm interviewing a general auto repair owner or a collision shop owner, I've already got a huge set of questions ready to go. I don't even have
Yeah.
to think about it. You know, here they
Yeah.
are. You know, these are the 200 questions I have to ask you. So it's good in that sense, and it's also good. Like if you think about what we do every day, Neil, is that we're matchmakers. You know, we're playing that game of solitaire where you have all those cards down, and you pick up one card, and you pick up another, and you have a match. You put them
Yeah.
aside, and if you don't, you put them back down. And you know, there's a lot more to our industry than that, but that matching is an important part of the game. And if you're dealing with 15, 20 different industries, you got all different buyers and all different sellers. It's hard to make those matches up. Where if you're specializing in one or two industries, it's easier to make those matches because you pick up a buyer and maybe that auto repair shop for that buyer just doesn't fit for some reason. But you'd be like, oh, I've got this other one, or I'm about to bring this one on, or whatever it is, and it's easier to make those matches up. And
Yeah.
you start to buyers reach out to me and I have conversations with them because they're like, hey, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for, because they know I specialize in auto repair, and they're
Uh-huh.
specifically looking for an auto repair or specifically looking for lawn or landscape.
Yeah.
So they're reaching out and saying, this is what I'm looking for. And so your database is growing and growing and growing. And,
Yeah.
the biggest thing, Neil, is, gosh, I shouldn't be admitting this on video, but I'm going to, 15, 20 years ago, if you would have asked me like 5 years ago, what would I have done if I would have been 35 years old and
Uh-huh.
I was going to restart my career? I'll tell you, I would have, 5 years ago, I would have said if I restart my career at 35, I would have been a residential real estate agent and
Yeah.
not a business broker.
Yeah.
I love business brokerage, but my mindset a few years ago was that it's hard to duplicate what you do in business brokerage. Like residential real estate, if I was a residential real estate agent, I wouldn't be a residential real estate agent selling 6 or 7 homes a year. I'd be selling 200 homes a year
Yeah.
with a whole team underneath me, and we would have systems and processes in place. If you think about residential real estate, it's the same thing almost exactly each time. You got to do home inspections and evaluations and blah, 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 blah. It's almost the
Everything
same
fits
thing
into a
where
little
in
box.
it does, and in business brokerage is a lot. It's not like that, and a
Yeah.
big part of that is that we're dealing with a lot of different industries. Whereas when you start to corner yourself and put yourself more into a vertical, it's easier to create those systems and procedures to make things flow smoother,
Yeah.
better, faster, more efficient, be more effective.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just about making our job easier, but making being more effective for our
Yeah.
sellers, our buyers, and for the
Yeah.
people we work with, the attorneys and the lenders and franchisors and things like that.
Everybody wants a process. We can be more efficient, and it makes sense when we have a process, but it's hard when you're dealing with different types of businesses. The same process doesn't work. And I like what you said about the buyer questions. Every time, sometimes you get that question from the buyer, and you're like, that was a really good question. Like, I can, for specialists, you could use that moving forward for every other business that you're trying to sell. Whereas if it's specific to one business and you don't sell that business again, you don't get to use it. So I can see where it's an
Yeah, and I
iterative.
do that all the time. Like a buyer asks a question, like I thought I had a lot of really good. I missed that one. That's a great question, and I add it. You're exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it doesn't fit into nice, pretty boxes in business brokerage. Everything it's always you show me the perfect deal and I'll show you a liar is is what we say. Like there's no perfect deal. There's always hair on the deal, and that's what makes it challenging, right? Um,
Mhm.
so that's interesting. You were saying that Carrie likes it different each time, whereas there's you can go deep or you can go wide. And right now it sounds like you're going deep with the industry focus.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, and I'm enjoying it. They're two of my favorite industries. That's why I chose them.
Yeah,
Two of my favorite industries. Like, when I get leads, if there was either a lawn or an auto lead, I'd be like, oh, great. And I get excited about it.
yeah, yeah. And do they tend to be? That's two sets totally different verticals. But like we talked about my background. I'm a biologist. Like the naturalist type. Do they tend to start the landscaping businesses, the outdoor people? I'm trying to think of who these business owners are. Is it a lot of? There's always a mix, but is it more business owner mindset, focused on the money, or is it more blue collar types in these industries that you're working on?
Good question. So the bigger the business, so a lawn and landscape business, the smaller businesses, and get too small, I'm not selling them,
Yeah,
but you get the individual buyers that are buying them, and they might not have any experience in the industry,
yeah,
and that goes all the way up. I mean, like I've got a fertilization business for sale right now up north, and that attracted people that are not in the industry and attracted people that were in the industry. And I've got one that's coming to the market in Georgia in a couple weeks, and I think it's going to be the same way where you're going to get industry players and non-industry players. I think when you're talking about the auto repair shops, they tend to be more industry players or people that are in the industry in some manner,
yeah,
if that makes sense. So
yeah.
I think it's the lawn and landscape space. It tends to be less in the industry, and
Oh,
auto
that's
tends to
interesting.
be more in the industry.
That's kind of cool to see to be dabbling, not dabbling, to be practicing in two industries. You can see the unique intrinsic properties of two separate industries and how they probably balance each other. That's kind of
And they're so different.
yeah,
They're so different because, like, auto, you're talking about, it's got a fixed building where people are coming to you. You got that fixed building, whether you own it or you're renting it. You
yeah,
got employees, you're stuck within the four walls. But also, if you built yourself a good reputation, you know, you're killing it out there with the lawn and landscape. You're talking more of you might have a place that's rented, but you're going to them. They're not coming to you.
Yeah.
It's easier to scale and up and scale down. If you want to grow your business, put another truck on the road, another crew on the road. If you hit into bad economic time, you can take that crew off the road, and you're not stuck between the four walls. And it's two totally different kinds of animals. Whereas also auto, I mean, the pros and cons of them both. I mean, the thing about auto I love too is that you hit a bump in the road economy wise, a recession or something like that, auto
Yeah.
is going to tend to do pretty well.
Yeah, it does
So
better. It does better, I understand, because
yeah,
people
it
don't
does
buy a new
better.
car. They hang on to their older car. Yeah.
Well, it depends on what you're doing. Depends on what you're doing. So oil and lube, people might push their oil changes out a little bit longer than they would, or they push out getting
Um,
their tires replaced
yeah.
more than they would. So the general maintenance may be a little bit pushed out more. Like think of yourself, recession hits, you might not get your hair cut as much as
Yeah.
you normally do.
Yeah.
You're still getting it done, but and then whereas the repairs, yeah, you're not going to be buying a new car,
Yeah.
But people got to understand too, you can't push those oil changes out too long. I mean, that's what kills your car,
Right.
you know?
What about we talked earlier about adapting to technology. I've done some diagnostic visits or just listening sessions with some old timer auto shops, and I'm like, "How do you feel about these Teslas, these newfangled electrics?" And they're like, "Yeah, we don't do those. We like the old fashioned type of cars." Do you have with these aging auto shop guys? Do they kind of get aged out with the new technology that's coming in automotive?
Yeah, they got it. You got to keep up with it. You got to keep up with it. I
Yeah.
mean, do you know that somebody at the IBBA conference, I don't want to say who the person is, but their Tesla got a flat tire and they couldn't change the tire. They had to get their car towed 150 miles. But, it was, I don't know. I'm sorry. I got off topic there. What
No,
was
I
your
was just talking
question?
about the
Oh,
owners of these
the change in
businesses.
technology.
Yeah, they've been changing oil. You mentioned changing oil. Teslas, you don't change oil, and you got to have all
Right,
new
right.
equipment. And not just Teslas. You got Rivians. Like there's a whole big shift in automotive right now. And I'm just imagining that our clients typically are boomers that they've done a lot and they know the business, and now it's totally different. And they don't want to make new capital investments. They want to sell their business and retire. Like, is that a challenge in the automotive space?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about people that are in their late 50s, 60s, and 70s, they're probably not going to make that change. I
Yeah,
mean, they're looking at it and going, hey, I'm a couple years, away from
yeah,
retirement, moving on. I'm not going to make those major changes and learn all that stuff and invest all that money into a new company. But, it leaves open for a buyer a lot of, growth opportunity or a lot of opportunity for them to go in and increase their revenue by offering those new services, bringing
yeah,
in a tech or two that's more into the EV and bringing in some equipment. And it opens up, just more opportunity for growth. At the same time, like to us, it sounds like um, technology for EV is happening very quickly, and I guess it is in some ways, but in a lot of ways, it's not. I mean, they're still making gas engines
yeah,
cars, and
yeah,
that they're gonna every time they make them, those cars are going to be on the road for 20, 25 years.
yeah,
A lot of them. So even if they stop making that today, I mean, for the next 20, 25 years, those cars are going to need to be serviced.
yeah, absolutely.
And so it's not going to be an instant thing that's going to happen overnight.
Yeah, it's a slow
But
change.
I agree with you. If you're younger, and you're younger and you own a shop or you're a tech, yeah, you got to get with the program. You got to start investing in that new equipment, do that type of thing. If you're a buyer, I wouldn't turn my eye away from a business that is not dealing with EV because that's just giving you more opportunity down the road to
Yeah,
go that way.
yeah, it's a
But it's
balance.
everywhere because you look at the lawnmowers. I mean, go to
I
I went
know.
to the National Association of Landscape Professional conference, last year, and there was, I mean, you hear about it all the time. There's mowers out there that are robotic,
Yeah,
AI driven.
yeah. That's
It's
the
it's
future of
happening.
landscaping is probably a robot mowing your lawn, and that's where it gets interesting. Um,
Yeah,
well,
but still, it doesn't take away from the fact that that can't be a still good business for somebody to own because they still have to buy buy those mowers. They have to maintain those mowers. They have to program those mowers.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It could still be a lot of benefit to
Sure.
doing it. It's not like you can go on vacation for 2 weeks and you know
Yeah.
you're I don't know. Maybe someday your garage door open and the mower will go out by itself. But
We don't know. We'll have to find out. Well, so you've successfully pivoted into being a specialist. Any advice for brokers that are thinking about choosing one industry to make the pivot themselves? Any advice on that?
I think that they should highly consider doing a vertical. I think it's a great way to go. I think the benefits outweigh the negatives so much. You target the entire country to get to know that industry inside and out. I think that you'll get to a point where you're going to offer better service for your sellers and your buyers. I think you'll perform better yourself. I think you can come up with better systems and procedures. I think you need to look at the vertical you pick. One, I would not. I would go deep and not too broad. Like I know some brokers are like, I'm going to specialize in home service businesses. I mean, how many things can fall under home service, Neil? I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many things. It's too vague. I think the more niche down you get, the more successful you'll
Yeah.
probably be in it. So I wouldn't be afraid to niche down too much. I mean, I even question whether I should niche down to like collision shops and general shops, or you know what I mean. But I'm happy with just doing all that auto. But I see some brokers that they're picking really two general
That's
categories, and I
interesting.
think the other things.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Neil.
Well, that's interesting. You would say that going deeper into the niches is the strategy. I got a story on that, but go ahead with your point.
And I think that another thing you got to keep in mind is like what businesses how will that category do, in recessionary times, or
Yeah.
how will it do in bad economic times? How will it do in different types of environments that are out there? And the good thing is you are targeting the entire country. So, me being in Florida, concentrating in Florida type businesses, the hurricane comes in and, it kind of affects everything. Whereas, targeting the whole country,
I didn't think
you
about
know,
that. Yeah.
Florida might be, yeah, Florida's not getting hit, but, I can target other areas.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I keep that in. And obviously, how many of those types of businesses are being sold and what the marketplace is like that
Yeah.
out there right now for those markets. And both the lawn and the auto space are not top, hot markets, but they're pretty good markets. And then you got to look at your competition, who you're going to be competing against. So when you do that, stay away from auto and stay away from lawn.
Well, this notion of the riches are in the niches, that was the biggest lesson I learned from my tropical fish store. Because that was my story. I met a business broker when I sold my tropical fish store. And I don't know if I've told you this story, Jim, but I was doing the shark diving thing and then I bought a tropical fish store. It was actually a general pet store. Like they had some reptiles in there, but it's mainly freshwater fish and just a couple of saltwater tanks. But the first thing I did was I got rid of, they had like, turtles and iguanas. I got rid of all that. And then it was freshwater and saltwater. And then I looked around and there were two PetSmarts within 2 miles. And it was a losing proposition for me because the average freshwater fish would sell for like a buck 50. And I'm running a
Right.
retail store and people are leaving the average ticket price like $5. And saltwater fish, they would average like 10, $20 a piece. So immediately I got rid of all the freshwater fish. So PetSmart didn't sell saltwater. So I'm like, I'm a marine specialist now. And that got better. But
Yeah, yeah,
the rich,
yeah.
I got niched down to saltwater, but then I started to niche down into like not even fish, like marine invertebrates, shrimp, like colored shrimp. I sold a clam, a Tridacna maxima clam for $500. It's just a very ornamental, very specialized marine aquatic organism that was going deeper into the marine niche. So I quickly
Interesting.
learned like the more you pick it, this is proving your point that you just said, the more you go deeper, if you can find that market and they follow you, or you can find them, typically you become the only one that does that and people go to you for that. So I think it's wise advice and I've seen it myself.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, let's talk
That's
a
a good
little.
analogy.
Yeah. I love.
Real quick, one of my
Yeah,
first businesses I ever sold was a saltwater fish store.
tell me more.
That's probably all I can remember. That was ages ago, Neil. That was ages ago. It
Well,
was one. It was one of my first listings, and I sold it. Yeah, that's all I can remember.
I sold mine, and then I thought I was going to sell a friend of mine's, and I have a video about it on my YouTube channel. And I remember the buyer's name was Neal, and it became a lesson. This is like year one. I was like, I'm going to be the only guy to sell two tropical fish stores in my market, and it did not work out well. I didn't understand proof of funds. And the guy flew in, and I'm like, this guy's got to have money. And he told me in the parking lot before he met the owner that he hoped the owner would 100% owner finance. And um, didn't work out. But it's a little too niche because like that one that you sold, you got to find a fish guy. You got to find somebody that knows very detailed knowledge, a hobbyist that has a lot of intrinsic knowledge about the hobby. So yeah, it's
Well,
pretty
Neil,
interesting.
I'm just confused. I'm just confused how this guy flew in because you've been doing this what 10 years. How this guy flew in and knew to ask the seller for 100% owner financing. I thought you had to pay gurus 15, $20,000 to learn how to say to an owner, do you carry 100% financing so the seller can laugh in your face? I thought you had to pay 15, 20 grand for that.
I remember he was
So
like,
the
I
guy
spent
must have
my
been before his time.
he no, this was before that time. This was 10 years ago. I remember he said, I spent my last dollar getting here. I sure hope he owner finances. I'm like, oh my God, this is never going to work. But it's okay. I learned a valuable lesson, and you know, we move on from there. Well, so the riches are in the niches. Um, I think it's interesting what we've been talking about, that you're better serving your clients. The business owners are getting. You talked about you bringing a stronger buyer list because this is all you do. You're asking the right questions because you're taking the questions from other buyers that you've heard, and you're creating a stronger market for their particular business because you're bringing this list. So, and it works well for the broker as we talked about because you've learned it. You've gone so deep with the learning. I think you can make a pretty compelling argument for specialization in business
And you're
brokers.
creating those systems, and those systems are good for everybody. Those
Yeah,
systems are good for the seller, the buyer, and the broker.
yeah. So you found a way to put.
Not that anybody knows, like nobody besides you probably knows what those systems are, but the results of those systems is
Yeah,
what I mean. You know what I'm saying?
in a way that's you meant your story about wishing you sold real estate so everything fits in a box. This is kind of another way of doing that with business brokerage. You take a complex, messy, all different types of businesses and you simplify it down to one or two verticals and it gets more simple.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah. And then what I've done on top of that is I then this, Neil, is I've got a team as
Yeah.
well. So I've got a listing manager, somebody that works with buyers, and then I got somebody that works with the closing once it goes under contract, and then I oversee the whole thing. So each one of those people are specialists in their exact thing that they do as well.
I'm glad that you mentioned that and we don't have time to get into that now, but definitely check out Jim's content because you are a master at the process delegation and just basically spending your time on your highest best. Back to the relationship piece that you're spending time on. I think that's really good. Well, we're almost out of time. Speaking of time, so I want to kind of wrap things up. Anything else you want to add on this niche discussion we're talking about, the vertical piece?
No, but if a broker out there is listening to this and they want to do a vertical, do it now. Do it sooner than later. I can't tell you how many brokers I talk to that are like, I've been thinking about doing that for 2 or 3 years. And you know what? I was that same way. Like, just
Yeah.
do it. I wish I would have done it earlier.
Good advice. Good advice. If you needed a push, you just heard it from the one and only Jim Parker. Well, here you are. You're on the Raleigh Business Broker Show. I've established I'm a former marine biologist. I love to say that. I feel like that Seinfeld episode where they asked for a marine
Oh yeah,
biologist.
George
George
or
in the
Kramer. Was
golf
it
ball.
Kramer? George with the golf
Yeah.
ball.
So I got to ask you, Jim, what is your favorite fish?
My favorite fish. Can I say cow? Because I like beef better than fish. I don't like fish.
Well,
No, no, I
there is a
can't do that.
cowfish out there, but you can say cow. Yeah.
Well, probably doesn't taste like beef. Cow would be my first choice, and I got to tell you, Neil, and I'm sorry, I don't have a favorite fish, but I can tell you this: my wife and I, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, became a empty nest,
Uh huh.
and we bought. And when you become an empty nester, Neil, and I know that you're expecting a
Yeah, I'm
child,
on the opposite end of
another
the
child.
spectrum, but go ahead.
You're in the yeah, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But when you and your wife are becoming an empty nest, do not turn around and then get a puppy.
Oh my gosh.
That's the worst thing you can do is you become an empty nest. So every day I talk to my dog. I love my dog to death, but every day I'm like, a goldfish. I don't have to pick up the poop of a goldfish.
Yeah.
A goldfish doesn't wake me up. I don't have to walk a goldfish in the rain. Like so.
Goldfish
I
don't bark
mentioned
either.
goldfish like 5 times a day to my dog, so I'd have to go with goldfish.
Okay. Goldfish. Got it. Well, that's perfect.
Even though I'm a killer of goldfish.
I was gonna go and turn that knife a little bit about you and your husbandry techniques with goldfish, but okay, love that. Jim Parker is the goldfish. That's your selection. All right. Well, Jim, thank you for being on the program. I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for your service to our industry. We're both passionate about the industry. I hope people could feel that coming through. And thanks for sharing what you've learned about verticals in this industry. I think that's super useful as well. How can the people watching find more of the great Jim Parker?
Well, I don't know about the great Jim Parker, but nerdy Jim Parker. You can go to YouTube and you can search Jim Parker. Let's chat or Jim Parker Boss Talk. Me and my partner have a business partner have a channel going on Boss Talk, and there's some really
Oh.
good information in there as well.
And Jim Parker Business Broker is a good search term for you as well, I think. That'll bring you up.
Yeah, Bar Parker. Yeah, my website's parkerbusinessbroker.com.
Perfect. All righty. Well, we'll leave it at that. Anything else before we
Neil, thank you so much for having me on, buddy. I really appreciate it.
until next time, this is Neal Isaacs on behalf of Jim Parker and Malhala.